And then I'm making the host. And so now you can share your screen, Linda.
Okay, so let me pull it up. Oops. Do you see the slides, Diane?
Perfect.
When you share the screen, though, I can't like see everybody that's on, and I can't tell.
Yeah, you just kind of, I think you just have to toggle and see who's on.
Okay.
And then I think you can drag it at the top.
Yeah. Got it. I see so many blank screens, black screens. Can everybody put their pictures on, their video on?
Yes, they have to, so you don't have to teach to black screens, to like just darkness. Show their pretty little faces.
Videos, please. Awesome, Dave. Thank you very much. Oh, very cool. Diana, let me ask you when I want to stop sharing the screen. How do I get back to that?
You just, at the very bottom, you can just select, you should have an option that says stop screen share, or you can pause your screen.
I don't. I don't.
The place where it said to share screen.
Yeah, that's not there anymore.
Can you guys go in there, because I'm trying to do something. You don't see it at the bottom?
Nope. Oh, you sure? It's at the top. Got it. Okay.
Morning.
Hi, Deb.
Good morning.
Morning, Linda.
Good morning. All right.
Be right back.
Yeah, Linda, you feel free to start whenever works for you.
Okay. I'm just getting situated here. Okay, can you guys
Morning.
see everything on my screen, or can you just see the slides?
Just the slides.
Okay, just so that way, if I'm like reading messages and stuff, it's not everything showing up on the screen. Just making sure. Okay. All right, cool. Welcome, guys. So today we are going through Ignite, right? So we're going through make and receive offers. And if people can put their screens on, if you can put your videos on, whoever has the ability to do that right now or through on and off throughout the class today, it's really kind of helpful. That way I can see who I'm talking to, and it's just like I'm not talking to air. At any point during the class, feel free to, chime in, ask questions, interrupt. This is kind of a two-way type of class, right? So if we were doing this in the office, usually it's really conversational based. So I look for you guys to contribute, ask questions, share any experiences that you guys might have as well, okay? So we're doing making and receiving offers today. What I thought, because we're not doing it in the classroom and we're doing it here via Zoom, is there's going to be some areas that we're going to have to skip and kind of move past, such as, role playing and scripts and things like that. We'll just kind of read through those scripts, which will probably also shorten the class somewhat for us too. Okay. So it'll shorten the class for us a little bit too. So do you guys have your books in front of you? Do you have all of the information that was given to you tonight? So everybody has it about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm getting some people's, it's muted, so I'm sorry. All right, so let's just jump right in to this. That way we can kind of get to the bulk of the matter. So it is all about making and receiving offers, right? So we're going to pass through some of these slides. The expectations for today is to kind of learn how to present the offer when representing a buyer, learning how to present the offer when representing the seller, and then some scripts are going to be in your packets too. Some of those scripts are really helpful and useful, and even if you don't want to use them word for word, you want to make them your own, but they'll give you some food for thought and some direction when you might be a little bit lost, okay? Each scenario, each offer is completely different from the one prior to. So that's what is amazing about the real estate industry, is as you go through and as you're working with buyers and sellers, every transaction is a little bit unique and a little bit different. Your buyer's needs are going to be a little bit unique. Your seller's needs are going to be a little unique. So each offer is going to be tailored to that particular transaction. All right, and then we are going to learn how to set the stage for positive negotiations. Just out of curiosity, have people been in a transaction yet? I don't know where you are with your real estate careers. Has anybody have written an offer or have been in the midst of negotiations with transactions?
Yes, just a couple.
A couple? So that's you, Mark?
Yep.
Okay.
I've had
Who is that?
this is Trisha. I have had one.
Okay. All right. Awesome, Trisha. Thank you. Dave, were you shaking your head? Do you have one too?
Yeah, I did a transaction 2 weeks ago, and in the middle of another transaction, or at the beginning of the transaction, I'd say.
Okay. So have you guys been representing buyers or sellers in your transactions?
Buyers for me.
Buyers. How about you, Trish?
Buyers.
Buyer. Mark?
One of each
One of each.
now.
All right. Awesome. Great. So we're going to try to pull on some of your experiences and also some of your challenges that you guys might have had too. Okay. So hopefully we can help. So getting started. This is going to be a recap from last week. If you guys have brought together for your class today, contacts to reach out to, note cards to write, all the actual information that you're going to need for today's class. With that said, I'm going to have you guys do that at the very end of class, okay? We're not going to take time during class today to do that. So again, just to really focus on the bulk of the matter. But you are still responsible to be making your calls, making your contacts, making your note, writing out your note cards, and doing your 10-4s, okay? So your 10-4s, 10 people to talk with. You're gonna have your 10 people into your database, write 10 notes, and preview 10 homes. Previewing 10 homes right now is really, really hard. If you can get on MLS and look through some of the virtual tours, just be aware of what's going on with the market. That should be your primary focus if you can't get into the actual homes, okay? And then we generate. So we're not gonna do this. We're gonna just kind of make the best use of our time and have you guys do this on your own after class. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to talk about getting your head into the game here. Okay. All right. So the offer process, moving from a buyer or seller agreement to a sales contract. So this is kind of like, the ultimate goal, right? So if you're working with the buyer, let's start on the buyer side. If you're working with the buyer, you've really kind of coached them along the way. You've had your buyer contract meeting with them. You've learned where they are, what they're looking for. You've probably helped them determine, the location that might have changed somewhat from the start of your search, or the size of the house that they were looking for, or what their wants and their needs and how those were different to meet with their budget. So you've kind of worked through them with them through all these problems for a little bit, and now you've come to the position where they finally found a house that they really like and they want to put that offer in, which is a really exciting time for both you and for them, because they've finally found something that's meeting all their criteria. So now the goal is to make sure that you can get an offer in and get it accepted and help them achieve that goal and keep moving forward. If you're working with the seller, that just means that you've been really good with your marketing. You've been very diligent with following up with all those leads. You've been calling other agents. You've been doing your reverse MLS search. You have, priced it appropriately, and getting that energy around the house. So that way you've been able to attract all of those buyers. So both sides of it's going to be very rewarding, but it's also can be a very stressful time, right? So now you're moving to the offer stage. Ooh, I got wicked feedback. Sorry about that. So now you move into the offer stage. Oh, we got to fix this. Sorry.
It's probably not you, Linda. It's probably somebody who's not muted.
Yeah, I got to turn it down maybe just so I don't feel I can hear myself talking like 5
Sorry
times.
about that.
You guys good? Okay, so so your goal is to try to keep emotions in check, keep the energy going, right? Because the more time people sit and contemplate during the negotiation stage, sometimes they start second guessing, or they start thinking, I'm not going to get it. So now they start thinking negativities about the house. So when you're entering this process of writing the offer and the negotiation stage, the goal should be to remind people what it is that they liked about the home and to keep it moving at a nice pace to keep everybody's excitement and energy on the positive side, okay? So time truly can be of the essence. And when we go through the offers, you're gonna see how to write an offer. You're gonna see that paying attention to the time structure is important. You never want 48 hours to go by without a response. Well, now everybody's thinking the worst in their heads, and now they're starting to kind of go a little bit more negative, and you've lost that momentum. So we're going to talk about different ways to make sure that it's a positive experience and trying to keep the goal in mind, without keeping everybody's emotions high. You want to keep them kind of managed. That's our goal. We're the professionals. We want to keep everybody calm, let them know, we're moving in the right directions. So we'll go over some of the strategies with that too. Okay. Let's see. They always kind of bring us with all these little points to make for you guys. So I want to make sure that I'm hitting all of them. All right. So the offer process. Have you guys ever seen a page like this that kind of walks you through the offer process, or anything like that has timelines on it for you to help you with writing the offers?
The process diagram.
Yeah, so this is the process diagram. And then there's also another diagram, and I don't have it in the slide, but I can email it out to you, which I always use as my timeframes for writing an offer. Like, you want to make sure that home inspection's done within the first 7 to 10 days. You want to make sure that your P&S is written and signed within 10 to 14 days of the offer. So there's specific dates that you kind of want to follow as you're writing an offer to make sure, again, that it's moving in a timely process. And that's our job, to make sure that we're staying on top of those dates. So there's this diagram here that you see on the screen, and then there's also another diagram which I can share with you guys too. Okay, just remind me later. So the offer process, so your buyer, you're working with the buyer, you've already gone through, we're going to go through the checklist for it. But
Can you email it to us, please?
yeah, I can. So you're going to go through the writing the offer, presenting the offer to the seller's
Can you
agent.
email it to us, please?
Yep, I can email it to you. I'm not sure who
Can
said.
you email it to us, please?
Yeah, I will. I will get everybody's emails from Diana because she's recording and she marked down who is on the call. So I'll be able to do that for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. So we're gonna present the offer, and we have three options, right? When you present the offer, this is pretty obvious. Either the seller is gonna accept the offer, they're gonna try to negotiate, or they're gonna reject the offer outright. When we talk about it on the seller side, we'll talk about why rejecting an offer outright is not usually the best option, because you want to try to work with an offer that you have in hand, even if it's far apart. You just never know where that person will go to. So hopefully you're going to have one of the other two circumstances here of either they're going to counter or they're going to accept the offer straight out. Okay, if they're looking to counter, then clearly we have to start with our negotiation skills. If they're going to accept the offer straight out, that's great. We're going to have to start trying to close each side. So when representing the buyers, you're going to need to prepare to write the offer. We have a checklist for that. You're going to need to write the offer, and then you're going to present the offer to the listing agent. Do you guys have all this paperwork with you that has like the checklist there? Do you have that page? I believe it's like page 13. Do you guys have that in your books or no? I don't know if that's just like on the instructor side. You guys have it? Okay. Thanks, Steve. So when you're preparing for an offer, these are things that you should be discussing with the buyer at your buyer consult, right? You want to make sure that they're working with a loan officer and that they have a pre-approval letter by the time that you're getting to that offer stage. If you're taking them out looking at homes and showing them homes, and then all of a sudden they find something they love, and in today's market, if it's a multiple bid situation or offers are due like right away and they don't have their pre-approval, that's going to delay you and possibly they're going to miss out on that home. So it's something you want to start talking with your buyers about right away, is their pre-approval. What they, for them, you want to let them know it's going to help identify where your comfort zone is, how much you want to borrow and how much you're going to put down. And that's going to give you the direction of what you can be looking at, right? You don't want to be looking at prices that are houses that are overpriced that they can't afford, or you're looking at something that's a fixer-upper and that maybe they can afford a little bit more, and that's what their dream would be. So pre-approvals are really important. Do any of you guys have loan officers that you like to work with yet or feel comfortable with? Dave, who do you use usually?
I've been using Vin Lee for the last couple of transactions.
Yep, he's awesome. Yep, he's one of our vendors. He does a lot for KW. Anybody else? Steve, do you have anybody you like?
Bob Malone.
Yeah. He's with us usually for all of our masterminds. Yes. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he handles a lot of different types of loans. I refer to him quite often. He's a great guy to be working with. Anybody else? Mark, you had a transaction. Who did you use with yours, or did the buyer choose?
I worked with Homebridge, Jason Gravel, and I'm working with James Solomini from Guaranteed Rate at this point too.
Okay, good, perfect.
Question for you, not to get off topic, but if, in the transaction I worked with most recently, we were kind of doing things like up until the day before, going into the day of closing. Is that unusual? Like, I'm just questioning if I should be looking at other options next time around.
Yeah, like what things were you doing day of or right till the day before?
They were still trying to, the file was still with underwriting up until like the night before at like 6 p.m., day before the closing. And, I've heard mixed things, like whether it's normal or, we did buffer at like a few extra weeks in too for another reason. So I was just kind of interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, my thought that is unnecessary stress. So to try to get it out of underwriting and clear to close a couple days at least prior to is the goal.
Yeah.
That seems very stressful for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know the circumstances, like if there was something that they couldn't get clear until the very end. Like I had one that we didn't get the clear to close until the very end just because the septic was being installed. And we had to wait
Mhm.
until we got their certificate from the Board of Health. So we were kind of touch and go on that. But for the most part, your goal is to get that clear to close. Those are like wonderful words to hear. And then you know you're right on the good path, right? All you need at that point is your 3 days for the TRID to make sure that the buyers receive their closing docs 3 days prior to the close. That should be your only stress point, is make sure that that buyer receives those closing docs 3 days prior to, not that you're still waiting for it to get out of underwriting, because then they still have to prepare all the paperwork and get the package over to the attorneys, right? So
Yeah, it was super chaotic, and that's why I was, I think there were some issues with the solar company and whatnot, but just hearing that's helpful. So,
yeah, I mean, we
Yeah,
all,
kind of put on.
I had a transaction with guaranteed rate, and it was horrible. So I would never do it again.
yeah. And so there are a couple lenders out there that are very challenging. I haven't really worked a lot with guaranteed rate, but I did have a transaction that was challenging with Bank of America. So, we can't really tell our clients who to use or who not to use, but we should be aware that if we're using certain lenders, it might be a little bit more challenging. And so it's going to be on us to be a little bit more diligent with them and make sure that they're hitting their dates, and kind of keep calling and hounding them and making sure that we're not going into the day of close without our clear to close. And no matter how hard we try, sometimes it's just not possible, especially like I had one for Bank of America, and they're located in North Carolina. So it was like impossible. They ended up not pulling it together in time. And my clients, it was a Friday close, and my clients couldn't close until Monday, and they had to go to a hotel for the weekend, which was awful. But, you kind of know which lenders are going to pull through for you and which ones won't, but it's ultimately our buyer's choice. We just have to make them aware of the complications that could happen when using maybe a guaranteed rate, or Bank of America. Sometimes Wells Fargo is difficult too. Some of the big banks are hard. It's nice to have a local person, right? Like a Bob Malone or a Vin. Those guys are local. They're receptive. They're active for us. So not to ditch any lenders, I just was kind of be a word to the wise, just to stay on top. If you see things starting to go awry, put your antennas up and just, start staying on top of them. Okay. So after we've walked through with our buyers about the pre-approvals and how important it is to get a pre-approval letter, we would then, once we found that home that they want to put that offer in on, you need to do your due diligence on the buyer side and make sure that it's fair market value. Remember, as a listing agent, we do a CMA to determine fair market value, because that's, you or I don't price the property. We would love to get the most for our clients, but the fair market value really gives us the indication and dictates what it's probably going to sell for. So not only doing that on the list side, but when you have a buyer, it's very important to go back and look at the comps, see what's sold, and see what fair market value should be, so we can best guide the buyers as to, are they overpaying, are they underpaying, are they being competitive? Okay. And then you're going to want to review that with your buyer, so that way they feel confident with presenting what they are able to present for their offer. I always pull up the public records too. Not that public records are always accurate, but I like to look in the public records and compare what information is in the public records to what information is in MLS. Sometimes it doesn't jive. If it doesn't jive, then that's a conversation that you can have with the listing agent, just to have clarification on that. Okay. Some towns are not very good about keeping up. They might still have it listed as a 2-bedroom, but it's a 3-bedroom, and clearly that would affect the price. And then you want to make sure, before you're starting to go down the line of all of this, that you talk with the agent, the list agent, to make sure that the property is still available. Right now we see how hot it is with the inventory low. These properties are going quick. Even if it says all offers due by Monday, that offer might have already had an accepted offer on a Friday evening. And now, you've got your client's very excited. You're putting time and effort into this. So have that conversation with the list agent. Make sure that it's still available. talking about having conversations with the list agents, this is really super important, especially if you're in a multiple bid situation, which depending on the price ranges right now, you're seeing it happen often because inventory is low. Have a rapport with that list agent. Give them a call, talk to them about the house, find out whatever information you can. What is it going to take for my buyer, my client to be able to get this home? What's important to your seller? Is it the time that they want to move within? Is it having flexibility to move? Is it a rent back? Is it solely price because they need every penny to get to their next spot? Find out what is motivating that seller so you can tailor your offer and your presentation to what the seller is most receptive to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Also see, you know, what else is going on with the property? Is there any information that maybe wasn't disclosed when you showed the property or disclosed in MLS? Is there a seller's disclosure form, the seller's disclosure sheet that you could review with your client before making the offer? If you didn't realize the roof is at the end of its life, that's an expense, right? So you're going to want to be able to write the offer knowing that. Or let's say the septic has failed. Or you anticipate the septic to fail. Who's going to cover that expense? Again, that's a big expense. So any information you can get to better direct that offer is all valuable information when you're talking with the list agent and trying to build that rapport. Okay. Some techniques when you're writing an offer in a competitive bid situation that we found has really helped is if you think about it from the seller's side, and the seller's seeing a couple offers come across, and you're saying that your home inspection is 7 days or 10 days from now, the seller doesn't want to take that property off the market for 7 to 10 days waiting for your home inspection when they know they have 3 other offers that might be able to either waive home inspection or they're doing home inspection ASAP. So bear in mind in a competitive situation, how can you best position yourself? So what I like to do is I have a couple home inspectors that I use regularly, and I'll call and find out what their availability is before I write that offer. So if I'm writing an offer on a Friday, I can tell that list agent, listen, we're putting in an offer, and to support that, we can have a home inspection scheduled for 9 a.m. on Monday morning. Something goes awry on home inspection, you haven't missed a beat, and you can go right on to that next offer. That puts the seller's mind at ease that their house isn't going to be off the market for a week. Flags are going to go up wondering why it was off and now it's back on. You're right on top of it. You're moving it along the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you guys also encountered any other ways to really kind of get your offers to kind of be the front runners besides price?
I try to talk a lot about like flexibility. So if the buyers have, they're a tenant at will or something like that, and the sellers have, they need to find suitable housing, then, I always try to like really emphasize that, we're super flexible, easygoing, understanding.
100%. That's great, especially because you've talked with the list agent, you've developed that rapport, you know what the seller is looking for. The seller might not have any place to go, or you saw it in MLS that it's, subject to suitable housing. So to try to tailor that. We were on a masterminds a couple weeks ago, and one of the agents from Braintree had said she had a listing, and she wrote in the listing something very specific, and I can't even recall what it was, and she had like 8 offers be submitted, and only one agent addressed the very specific comment that she had made in the MLS. And because of that, they accepted her offer, because they're paying attention. They were reading it, they understood it. So in any of you, where it says disclosures or firm remarks, make sure if there's something like, a family chandelier is being excluded, you make a notation, you've recognized that, you understand that, you're making your offer based with the knowledge that that is being excluded, and you're good with that, okay, because they feel like you're hearing them, which I thought was interesting. Okay. Inquire about the activity on the property if you're talking with the list agent too. If it's been on the market for 30 days, don't just assume that there's no activity. I went out to show a property the other day down in Norton. The house had been on for 22 days. There's only 16 houses on the market in Norton, believe it or not. And so we just assumed that we could wait till Saturday to go take a look. And then I was like, let's just go sooner rather than later. We went down on Wednesday. We looked at it Wednesday. My clients didn't like it. The agent's like, well, I'm glad we wanted to make sure because we have another offer on hand. So if we had waited to Saturday, assuming that it's been on the market for a couple weeks now, that there must not have been activity, we would have lost out if they had really wanted that house. So check in with the agent and ask what the activity is like. Have they had any offers? They don't have to disclose all the information, but they can at least give you some background. Okay. Also, too, I try to ask if there's a lead paint form if it's not attached to the MLS listing. And I know that my clients might have kids and it's an older home and that's important to my client. Then I'll ask, is there a lead paint form? So seller's disclosure, lead paint form, because when you submit an offer, it's best to have it submitted as a whole entire packet. Agents aren't going to want to come back chasing after you for, one sheet here, one sheet here. So when we submit an offer, it's going to be a full packet. So again, we are showing that we're professional and we're best representing our clients. Okay.
See, Linda?
Yep.
Sorry, this is Delaney. Just a quick question. So, as someone who's very new to the business, do you find that other realtors are honest when I guess you never know, but when you say you're checking in just to get a pulse on them so they can tell you, where the listing is and, how much of that do you have to try to filter through to get to what
Great
the truth
question.
is?
So, sometimes they're going to maybe fabricate slightly and say that there's a lot of interest to try to get you to step on up and make an offer sooner rather than later, but they can't come out and say we have offers on the table if they do not. They could say that they've had a couple second showings. Most of the time, an agent's probably not going to tell you it's been dead. We've got nothing, bring us whatever you have. But at the same time, they have to be honest if they can't say they have offers if they don't, okay? That's just unethical. So you hope that they're gonna give you the information because we're all in this business and we'd like to think that everybody's gonna treat us the way we wanna treat that, the way we wanna be treated and how we're treating them. Yep. So writing an offer, I have a offer sheet here, so I'm going to see if this works. Hopefully it does. Can you guys see that?
No, you just have to reshare for that particular. Zoom doesn't auto share, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me see.
I think it's either, for you, it should be at the bottom maybe, or it could be at the top too.
Yeah, it's at the top, but it keeps shutting down before.
Oh yeah, it disappears, it goes, yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Can you guys see the offer to purchase now?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, cool. Thank you. Technology is never my friend, so thank you for bearing with me, guys. As you probably, if whoever was on earlier understood, I couldn't get my AirPods to connect, and I'm like, okay, ditch the AirPods. We'll be fine with that. So contract to purchase. So writing an offer, I think it's kind of important for you guys to see the offer. They don't have this slide for some reason into this presentation, and I think that it's really important because where do you find it, first and foremost, right? A lot of my mentees are just like, okay, I need to write an offer, but which one is it? There's multiple ones to use. You can use the Greater Boston Real Estate. You can use the MAR forms. You can use a KW form. There's multiple offer forms to use. I like to use the MAR form, the 501. So I don't know how many of you guys have experience with Command or DocuSign or who still might be on the old system of .loop. But there's multiple places that you can find the offer. So ideally you're going to be in Command, right? So you're going to go into your Command. You are already going to have your buyer listed in Command as a contact, right? So you're going to go into Command, you're going to go into your opportunities. And when you go into the opportunities, which is going to be on the left side of your screen, you're going to kind of see all the icons there. Pull up that opportunity. and you're going to create a new opportunity. And when you create a new opportunity, you're going to need to pull your client's name in from your contact list. So that's why it's important that your client's already in your contact list. So I would start with my opportunities, start pulling in your documents from there. So how to pull in a document, you're going to go, there's like a little key in opportunities that'll say go to transaction and then go to DocuSign room. Once you're in your DocuSign room, and I know this sounds all foreign, but as you kind of weed through commands, you'll understand where they are. So I just want you to know that these forms are in your DocuSign room. Okay, and then the DocuSign room, there's like an add button, and you press it and it'll pull down the various forms from the library. Within the library, there's multiple forms. There's so many forms in there. Some forms that I've never even seen or have used, but they're there just in case we need them. And the MAR 501 is going to be your offer form. Okay.
Linda,
Yes.
I have a question as far as, are you going to show us how to send those out via DocuSign?
That would be a tech class. I can definitely, if you want to stay on afterwards, I can try to walk you through that if I can share my screen very well. I can go into Command and I can show you where I am with Command and how I start an opportunity, and I can definitely go into that with you. If you want to stay on after, we can definitely approach that.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So when you're writing an offer, there is a checklist of the items that you're going to need to write the offer and then to submit the offer, right? So some of you guys that have written the offers before, I'm sure you're familiar with it. But as I mentioned, you want to kind of send a complete packet. I just had a property on in Pembroke, and we had multiple offers. We had like 33 showings in 2 days. We had multiple offers come in on it. And the offer that we ultimately accepted, the agent did a phenomenal job putting this all together as a package. She submitted a little letter first from the buyers stating that, you know, their offer might not have been the highest one, but it was a young couple that was going to go in and take over this family home and why they wanted to settle in this home. So it went a little bit more personal, which was nice. And that if they had more money, clearly they would put more money down, so it wasn't a reflection of the house, blah, blah, blah. But in that packet, not only was there the offer, but there's a copy of your pre-approval. She had a copy of my lead paint form. She had a copy of the seller's disclosure. She had a copy of the deposit check with the account numbers whited out, right? So if you're gonna enclose a copy of a deposit check, make sure you're kind of keeping the pertinent information, like the account number on the bottom of the check, whited on out when you're submitting it, so that way you're helping keep privacy for your clients, right? So there's a packet of information that you're gonna wanna put together, and then the mass license disclosure, okay? So for the contract here, when you're writing it, as you guys can see, and you probably can't see the whole form yet, so I'll scroll with it here for you. So you're going to see the buyers and the sellers' names. When you get to the seller, I always will put owner of record. Okay, the last house I sold, they put the person's name in it, and the gentleman had just passed, and it was an estate sale, and so the family was it was upsetting for them to see. So I always just put owner of record. You don't know what the situation is, and you don't know if it has changed. Public records, like I said, is not always accurate. So, and then for the next line, it says the agent. You're going to put in your name and the company that you're with. So Keller Williams Signature Properties, Keller Williams Showcase, whichever company you're with KW. And then you're going to check buyer's agent. Okay, that allows you to be compensated as the buyer's agent, because sometimes in MLS you're going to see that facilitators are compensated slightly different. Okay. And then it's going to say that you're on behalf of, and then you can write the people that you're representing. The buyer's offer to purchase a real property described as, that's going to be the address. So I'm going to just use my property as an example, 26 Pinecrest Ave, Pembroke, Mass, 02359. And it says, together with all buildings and improvements, which have been introduced by, and you're going to put your name and your company in there again. Okay. Going back to the property described as, I always will refer to the MLS number too, as described in MLS number, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
A question,
Mhm.
do you ever put in like the book and page number from the registry?
I do. So
Okay.
I put both of those in as described in MLS, and then I do Plymouth County Registry of Deeds book and page. Because if there's a discrepancy, I want to make sure that we are knowing that this is what we're referring to. Okay.
And you pull that from MLS?
I do. Yep.
Okay.
Or you can go right from MLS and hit like the little icon above to show the public record. And in the public record, it'll show you the book and page. Because sometimes in MLS, an agent might not take the time or the effort to put in the book and page, and they'll just put 000 or 999. And so
Right.
I'll go into the public records to make sure that I have it correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then the purchase price. So let's say you're putting in a purchase price of $500,000, and your deposit, the binding deposit, is normally $1,000 binding deposit, and then you're going to put an additional deposit down at the time of purchase and sales. Okay. Now this is a big question that buyers usually ask, is they don't know how much they're supposed to be putting down at the time of P&S, right? I typically will, depending on how they're financing, if they're doing a conventional, then I'll suggest to my buyers to put down 5% at P&S, less the $1,000 deposit. If they're doing like an FHA or a VA loan, and I know that they don't want to be financing conventional, and they're maybe financing, you know, they're looking for a loan for 97%, then I'm not going to have them put the 5% down if they don't have the liquid cash to do that. We'll put down 3%. Okay.
A quick question, I'm sorry. In that 5% down, is that $1,000 binding deposit included, or it's in addition to that?
So I would do 5% less the $1,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So that way, and the reason why we do that, Deb, is it makes it easy. If the commission is 5%, that 5% is already held in escrow by the listing company. So when it comes time for close, it just makes it really easy to kind of distribute.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then there's a place for you to check off if the offer is going to be with a check, and when that check is going to be sent. Okay. So duration of offer. So we talked a little bit about keeping the offer moving. Duration of offer is very, very subjective, right? So it's going to be based on that situation. Do they have maybe an open house coming up on a Sunday, and you're trying to get your offer accepted prior to that open house to convince them not to kind of move forward with that open house? Are the people away? Is it an estate sale where there's multiple family members that are going to need to review this offer? So there's a lot of different situations. Typically, I would put no more than a 24-hour response time. So if I'm writing an offer at like 5 o'clock at night on a Thursday, I will ask for it by no later than 5 o'clock on a Friday. Again, from talking to the list agent, you might have a better idea that maybe the family is retired, or and they can get you an answer quicker. I might ask for one by noon the next day, just to keep it moving. Okay. So fill out with the list agent what the situation is and how quickly can they address this. If you're writing it out at like noon and giving it to a list agent at noon, you'd like to think that they're going to be able to address it after they come home from work or whatever their situation may be later that evening. So I might do 10 a.m. the following morning. So I try to keep it a small window. Okay. And again, the purpose for that is to keep the energy going. So you'll fill that part out in number 2. Number 3 is your purchase and sales. And remember, we talked a little bit about a timeline. So for the timeline, I like to work it from the offer to home inspection. And then I go back to purchase and sales and fill in my purchase and sales date. So if you can do a home inspection quicker, that's more positive for the seller. If the standard is usually 7 to 10 days, because sometimes home inspectors are super busy and you can't get them faster than 5 or 6 days out, or if you're making an offer on a Monday and your client can't do a home inspection until a weekend. But if you have the ability to keep it a shorter time frame, keep it a shorter time frame. Okay. So home inspection contingency is going to go down on 6B. So just to kind of jump down there. So B, inspections, you're going to say that, you know, where the buyer sole cost buy. So you'd put in, you know, 7 days, 10 days max, but try to keep it within that 7-day window or shorter in today's market. Okay. Make sure you stay on top of those dates. So let's say you're writing this offer on July 1st, you're saying home inspection is going to be due by July 7th. Purchase and sales agreement is going to be due by, I would say, 10 days after that. So P&S is usually 10 to 14 days. Home inspections at 7 to 10 days. P&S is usually 10 to 14 days. The shorter the window, again, the better it is for the seller if you're in a competitive situation. But bear in mind holidays, bear in mind days of the week. I don't like to do any P&Ss due on a Friday, because if you or the attorney needs an extra day, now we've just bumped it to a Monday. I like to try to put my dates midweek, so that way we're not going over a weekend. And for P&S, you also have a time. I always put later in the evening, because if an attorney is leaving at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and then they're not getting it to you until 6, and you say P&S is due until 5 o'clock that day, now we need an extension. So I will usually put till 8 p.m., give it time for the attorneys to get it to us agents, and for us agents to circulate it to people if they're commuting back and forth when we're not in the midst of COVID or working from home. That's really important to take into consideration, okay? So I usually do later in the evening, like 8 o'clock. And then the line 4 is your closing. So closing, again, from talking with your list agent, is determining what the seller is looking for, but typically it's a 45-day close. Okay. If you're doing a cash offer, you can close in 2 weeks. If you're doing a straightforward loan with some of the loan officers that we have relationships with, they can do a 30-day close. But check with the loan officer if you're trying to push it any shorter than 45 days, can they accommodate a 30-day close? Okay. Sometimes the seller needs the 60 days, like you had said, Dave, earlier. Like if it's subject to them finding suitable housing, we need to be cognitive of that. Escrows. The escrow deposit's always going to be held by the listing company. So if you're working with another company, let's say I'm with Signature Properties, but I'm doing a transaction with KW Showcase, I'm going to put KW Showcase in there. So escrows are always held by the list agent. 6 are your contingencies. So we talked about the home inspection contingency, but you also have your mortgage contingency. So this information is going to come directly from your pre-approval when it comes to the amount that they're looking to borrow. So you're going to make sure that you pull that amount. If it's an 80-20, do the calculations. If they're saying it's a 97%, then you can do the calculations on that. At prevailing rates, terms and conditions by. So that's your commitment date. Okay, so commitment is different from application. So you're going to have a line on number 6 for your application date. Your application date, I always align with your purchase and sales date, just to keep it easier for you guys, so you're not having dates all over the map that you're trying to stay on top of. Align your commitment date with, align your application date with your P&S date. Okay. For commitment, again, talk with your lender, but usually for me, I find that lenders are very comfortable with a 3-week or a 21-day window from the time of purchase and sales. They typically can do it slightly shorter than that, but I don't want to have to go back and ask for an extension. I'd rather have it ready for my list agent a couple days earlier than having to go back and ask for an extension. So I would do 21 days. And remember, when we're educating our buyer why it takes so long to get that commitment, in that 21-day time frame, we've signed purchase and sales, and now we have to wait for the bank to have the go through underwriting, get an appraiser assigned, have the appraiser come on out take a look at the property. The appraiser usually doesn't get the report back in for maybe 5 business days. So you're already at like almost 2 weeks right there between getting the appraiser scheduled, getting them out, and getting the report back to underwriting, and then for underwriting to approve it and move it forward. Okay. So, so for timeframes, I usually do 21 days for your commitment. And then going into 7, if you don't have anything in paragraph 7 that you need to address, you write none. 99% of the times I'm writing none. For 9, it's the additional terms. So that's where you're going to pull in any additional terms that your buyer might want. So does the buyer say that they want all the kitchen appliances and they want to make sure that that's included in? Does the buyer not want, I don't know, a hot tub? You know, you want to make sure that the seller is removing the hot tub. So you would put any additional terms there that are pertinent to that property. In addition to the terms that are kind of specific to that property, I have standard terms that I put into every offer. And I always make sure that that offer says, if it's a Title V, that the buyer has the right to review and accept the Title V report. Because that Title V report may say that it passed, but it has a conditional pass. It needs a new D-box. It needs something, you know, here or there. And that might not be acceptable to your client. So you want to make sure that you have the opportunity to review and accept that Title V. I also write that it should be subject to a mutually agreeable purchase and sales. And some might say, well, that's obvious, right? But by writing that, the attorney that represents our client has the ability to change language or put additional items in there that we might not have addressed in this offer that came to light. Okay. If it's a condo, you're going to have other things that you're going to want to put in there. So it's going to be subject to reviewing all the condo docs, the financials, the budget, the meeting minutes. So there's a lot when it comes to condos. Condos are kind of a different animal than a single family home. Okay, those can be a little bit more involved. But it's very important to make sure that you have a copy of those condo docs and those financials, and make sure that there's no special assessments, because that would definitely affect the price that you want to put in for your offer. And then when it comes to a home sale contingency, that would also go there too. So if your buyer can only purchase because if they sell their home, you need to write that in there as well. Okay, so that's where that little box can contain a lot of information, and sometimes when you're typing you run out of space, so you can just say see addendum A, and you can start in a Word document and put addendum A with the property address and write down any additional terms there, because they do kind of limit you in that little box there. Okay. And then you have your buyer sign, and then you're good with that part of the offer. The other form, have you guys seen the mass disclosure one? The license? Yeah, pull it up.
Like the agency disclosure, or like the buyer's, seller's, facilitator's disclosure?
Oops. Yep, exactly. Sorry. Exactly, saying that it's a buyer, that you're representing a buyer. Let's see if I can get this one up for you. Can you guys see this one, or no, not yet? Eleni, you're usually really good to giving me direction.
What do you need? Yeah, it's just that reshare. It's
All right, here we go.
There it is.
Perfect. So this is mandatory with every offer that you submit. Okay, so this is gonna, again, when you're filling this out with your client, you want to mark off that you're a buyer's agent, and then you're going to need to check whether you are a non-designated agency or a designated agency. KW is a designated agency. All right, so you would check off the designated agency box, meaning that there's agents in our office that are representing buyers, and there's agents in our office that are representing sellers. You are representing a buyer in this particular situation. Okay, so you would check off designated agency and buyer. And then you make sure that you fill out the bottom part, your signature, you put your name, your license number, and that you're a salesperson. You don't, unless you have your broker's license. And then the date, and then you do it for your clients as well. Okay, so your clients' signatures, and then their names, and that they're the buyers, and then their dates. So this form has to go with the offer, and this just kind of describes it for your client. All right, so your checklist with the offer is this disclosure, your offer, again, a copy of the check, write out the account number information, pre-approval, seller's disclosure if there is one, lead paint form if they have one attached. If not, you can ask them for one, or you can just have your clients fill one out for the sellers to continue to fill out. And then if you're putting together a letter at all, okay, a cover letter. Let's see. Questions there?
You don't have to provide a second sheet, right? Just the first sheet?
The second sheet of the mass license? No, you don't have to include that when you're submitting the offer. That would be for, that's for your buyers to have, so that way when you're describing what they're signing, they can read what that's about.
Okay.
Okay. I think I have to resume share so you can see my slides. Can you see the slide again or no?
No.
That's what I get for trying to be fancy.
I had a quick
Krista-
follow-up question, Linda.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the additional terms and you can write in some contingencies in there, right? You had said that you always, as a rule of thumb, and that's the question, is it a rule of thumb, every time that there's a Title V, you have the review an exception of that Title V report? You do that every time?
I do it every time.
So
Yeah.
I thought I heard and this is years ago when I was like just starting out and then I took a break from it, but I thought I remember someone telling me that, you know, the less you can put there, like the better, so it doesn't raise any flags to the listing agent and then makes your bid more appealing to them. So
100%.
what would you say to that? You
Yeah,
still do it in light of that?
Yeah, because I think that it is something that's important, and that's something that could be very expensive for your client. And if there's no issues, then the seller's going to say, well, it already passed, or I already have the certificate in hand, or they know that it's not going to be any issues. But I do like to write that in just because I feel like it's safe. Now, with that said, if I know that it's a crazy multiple bid situation and my clients are like, I'm okay with it, you know, then I would leave it out, but I would explain to them the importance of having it in.
And just one other follow-up to that, is there a way that you could lump the Title V under the inspection umbrella and use that, say if you needed a new D-box, would you use that as a justifiable way to back out of the deal and get the earnest money back? You know what I mean? Is that possible or not possible?
That's a great question. You know, I've never used the inspection for the Title V before, but that's an interesting approach. I would probably defer to the attorney to see whether or not that could be used that way. But that's a great idea. I've never thought of that. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah. And when we are going through these transactions, remember we're part of a team. Our lender, our attorneys, you know, us, don't hesitate to rely on them if you have questions. I have a transaction that I'm working with right now, and my clients are 90% committed, but they are still kind of worried that something might come on the market within the next week or two, but they don't want to lose the house that they have. And they're like, you know, we've already met the home inspection criteria. We've already met the commitment date. So they're like, well, if something was to come on tomorrow, what's our liability? I'm like, well, me personally, I see that your liability is all the deposit that you put down. If you're backing out, we've kind of gone past all of those. Oops, now I totally lost my screen share. We've gone past all those dates. However, with that said, let's talk to the attorney. Maybe there's language in that P&S that I'm not familiar with that might be able to help us through this. So, I put in a call to the attorney last night, and I'm waiting to hear it to see if there's any other language in that P&S that I might not be familiar with that he might have tailored to make sure that we have an out, because it's new construction and it's taking longer than we had expected. Okay, so rely on your teammates. And I always refer to them that way when I talk to my clients. You have a really solid team behind you. Your loan officer is so-and-so. They're wonderful. They're going to work really hard on your behalf. Your attorney is great. They have lots of experience with this particular situation. Let's kind of refer on them, and we're going to work together to get this to the end for you. Okay. So I think you guys have my screen back up, right? Do you have the slides back up? Yay, that's a win.
Yeah.
All right. So page 17, this is referring to. So we just kind of went past page 15, which means, the time for the acceptance, the financial terms, buyer pre-approval, loan approval, different conveyances. Page 16 addresses, everything on that offer that we just reviewed, the closing date, home warranty conditions. Again, sometimes there's a home warranty that's being offered. Some sellers will use it as a tool to kind of make their home stand out. So if that's in there, you can discuss who they're using for a home warranty and what is included in that home warranty. And then your contingencies in a cover letter if you choose to have that. All right, so on to page 17. So buyers and the offer objection. So these are some scripts that they've put together for us, and you have them there. I do think some of them are really good scripts, but because we're not going to really go into a breakout, it's really hard to do breakouts via Zoom. I'm not even sure how that's possible. We're going to go right past that and keep moving straight forward. But I would recommend that you do read some of these scripts. What I did like about this script that I did kind of highlight on page 18, when you're trying to negotiate, so do we have a part where we get into negotiations? I think that's near the end. But when you're trying to negotiate your offer, so you submitted your offer to the list agent, and the list agent has now countered back to you. When you're talking with your buyer, I liked the bottom of 18, and it just kind of reviews. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, by countering the seller, has essentially just sold you the home at $200,000. If we counter at $195,000, it allows the seller to walk away and accept another offer. Is the risk of selling your dream home for only $5,000, is that differential important to you? So are you okay walking away from this home is basically what they're saying, for $5,000, which over a 30-year fix equates to dollars a month. Are you okay with that? If you're okay and you want to stay where you are, let's move forward. But just kind of put that shadow of doubt in their mind. For $5,000, do they really want to counter at $195,000 in this example, as opposed to accepting the counter from the seller at $200,000? Break it down into terms, because sometimes people feel like it's more of a personal thing, that they're not going to go, that the seller didn't give enough, or I'm not going to go past this dollar amount. But when you break it down into terms, it's taken us how long to find your dream home? We have found it for $5,000 over a 30-year fix. Let's talk to the lender. Let's see what that breaks down to. What does that do to your monthly payments? Is that an option for you? Again, try to get them to kind of see the big picture. Sometimes we get fixated on just a single part of the picture when we're in a negotiation. So try to, open it up and show them the whole picture, because you don't want them to miss out on their dream home if it's something that's manageable for them. Okay. Again, we're here to consult and bring up different scenarios and let them make the ultimate choice. But you just want to make sure we educate them. All right. So I really liked how they pointed that out on that one on page 18. Okay, so representing the seller. Okay, So when we're representing the seller, it says that, we're receiving the offer, we're gathering information about the buyer, so we're doing the opposite side of things, and then we're presenting the offer to the client to reach a point of decision. Again, they have 3 options. They can accept it, they can reject it, or they can counter. Clearly, we always want to suggest to the seller that they counter. Even if they counter by just moving just a small increment, they're sending the message that, yes, we still have interest in working with you, but we're so far off, you really need to make a bigger step up for us to communicate, and really try to work together with this, okay? If you just flat out say no, we never know how far up we're gonna get that buyer, okay? So I always recommend to my sellers, even if we're far apart, just counter just a couple $1,000s lower, and let's see where we can get them up. We're sending a message that way. They're gonna get the message that they're far off and that they need to kind of come up, okay? So when receiving the offer, if we're on the list side of things, first and foremost, we want to thank the agent for the offer, and let them know if we think that other offers are coming in. We need to be fair to make sure that they're aware. If you think that you're going to be in a multiple bid situation as the listing agent, have the conversation with the seller, how they want to handle this, okay? When you're getting ready to put it on the market, you should be having these conversations, so that way it comes easier when you're in the situation and you are in a multiple bid. You've already addressed it. You know how you want to kind of proceed in this situation. There's a lot of different ways you can proceed. You can say all offers are going to be reviewed at a certain date and time. You can disclose in MLS that the seller has the right to accept an offer at any point. And you just have to be fair about how you are doing it. So if you say that there's no showings until Friday at 11, there's no showings at Friday at 11. And I can tell you, you're gonna have a handful of agents still call and see if they can get their clients in prior to, with every story under the sun that they're away or whatever the case may be, they're working. But if you put that in MLS, you need to make sure you stick to that. Okay, so whatever you write in MLS, you have to make sure you stick to. And if you say that you're not going to be accepting offers until a day and time, you can't accept an offer prior to that unless you go back in and change it in MLS, which still is really unethical to do. If you write it in there, that's what the agents have seen. Okay, so you're starting to see now in MLS that some agents are saying, highest and best offers by Monday at 5. Seller reserves the right to accept an exceptional offer prior to. So they're giving themselves an out. So just be cautious when you're reading the descriptions in MLS. If you're representing the buyer, if you're representing the seller, make sure that you are abiding by the guidelines that you're putting in MLS. Okay. Keep it a fair playing ground, or else you're going to have a lot of people calling you and not being happy with you. Okay. So gather information about the buyer. How long have they been looking? Do they have a pre-approval by the lender? Which lender? Can that lender be talked to, on the list side? Sometimes I will call a lender up if I'm confused about the loan type, or if it's a lender I'm not familiar with and I want to know how strong is this client. Bob Malone, somebody mentioned they use Bob Malone. Bob Malone will call the list agent. If you tell them I'm putting in an offer today for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Bob will call list agent A and say, I understand that Mr. and Mrs. Smith, my clients, have put in an offer. I can assure you that they are solid, they are qualified buyers, and that gives the list agent peace of mind, and also gives the seller peace of mind that there's not going to be a problem. Because right now, what we're seeing often, at least in certain towns, is that the appraisals are not coming in. So what happens if you're in a multiple bid situation and your buyer is going above and beyond, and as a list agent, I've advised my client to take this offer because it might have the highest amount in it, which isn't always the best thing, right? It's not always about just the price, but now the house doesn't appraise. What was the buying power of the buyer? What is their loan officer saying? Can they come up with the additional cash to be able to close the differential between the appraisal and the sale price? Okay, so it's important to know who the lender is if you're the list agent. If it's not somebody you're familiar with, call, introduce yourself, and also ask them a little bit about that client. Okay.
Quick question. Do they have the right to not talk to you?
Of course, if their client doesn't want them to disclose any information, they don't have to. But it's to the best interest,
Right.
you know, for them to be able to talk up their client and reassure you of their financial status. Yeah. If they're from out of town, why are they moving? Do they have a house to sell? Are they tenant at will? You know, again, what is their situation? All that information is important to know when representing your seller, because when you're presenting the offer, you want to give them peace of mind, or why one offer might be a little bit stronger than the other. And when you're in a multiple bid situation, sometimes it's overwhelming for the seller. You know, now they're looking at 6, 7, 10 offers. I had a house that had 18 offers on it. Like, we were like blurry eyed by the time you're looking at the 18th offer. We had to try to like combine it into categories: the absolute no's, the maybes, and the wow, these are incredible, and then try to weed through what's the best offer and looking at all the different terms. So if you have information about the buyer when you're reviewing the offers with the seller, whether it be one or whether it be multiple, you can kind of help either reassure that this is a solid offer, or I see flags, I have additional questions, and these are the reasons why. Okay. And have they made offers on other properties and have lost out, or, you know, where are they at with their buying process? So let's see, checklist for reviewing an offer. So when you're looking at the offer from the list side, remember the offer sheet that we had up there that we filled out for the buy side? You're going to want to review all those. You know, a lot of the time the seller just wants to know, what is the price? What are they coming in with? But it's the full picture that we have to remind the seller that we have to paint that full picture, okay? It's not just about the price, but what are the additional terms? Are they asking for $10,000 back as seller's closing costs, you know, from the seller for closing costs? So we need to look through that whole entire offer and not just stop at what the offer price is, okay? What's the deposits being put down? What's the closing time frame? Is that going to work? And like Dave said earlier, is there notations in that letter saying that they have flexibility? That might be valuable to the potential seller. Okay, so go through all of the items on that offer with your seller, not just the price. Okay, and again, you know, if the buyer's agent's presenting it all in one pack, and you have your lead paint form, your seller's disclosure, you have everything filled out, you don't have to start chasing everybody now. It just makes the transaction start off on the right foot, and it keeps it nice and smooth for the list agent on that side. Okay. Presenting to your client. So when you're presenting the offer to the client, clearly, if you can do it in person, that's the best way. If not, Zoom has actually been very helpful with that, because you can see their reactions. It's not just texting where you can't really hear their tonality or see their facial expressions. So if you can do it over the phone via Zoom, person is best, okay, versus sending them a text with the information or an email. You're losing some of that personal touch. One thing I wanted to just kind of note, because I didn't see it when I was reading through this packet, is when you're presenting the offer to your seller, remind them what their motivation is to be moving. Okay, so let's say the seller, again, it's a personal thing. My neighbor just sold for XYZ. I should be able to get that amount, and this offer is maybe $5,000 less. Okay, it's not about what your neighbor got. It's about, for $5,000 more, how is that going to change your life, right? It's going to allow you to make your next move. And so you just want to bring them back to, let's just focus on us. Let's just focus on your home in today's market and what this means for you, versus people get wrapped up sometimes on just the price. Okay, holding on to the home if it's been on the market for, let's say, 30 days, and now they're going to have to hold on to it for potentially another 30 days because we're maybe in the winter months and things aren't moving as quick. What type of expenses are you going to incur while we wait for another offer to come in? And we don't know what those terms would be. So now you have another mortgage payment, you have heating, you have electric, you have costs that you're incurring by holding on to the property. Does it make sense just to accept this and move forward? So remember, they are making the ultimate choice and the ultimate decisions, but we need to make sure that they're thinking of all aspects to this offer. Okay, and then whatever they choose, we stand by them 100%, but we just have to make sure that they're fully educated. Okay. Where are we here? So we are not going to practice scripts. We're just going to kind of go right past that. But again, the scripts are really good. I liked the script on page 22 that says recommend that your client accept the offer. There's some really good language in that script that you can create it to be your own. And it goes back to that motivation. I'll urge you to consider this offer very carefully and consider the value of meeting your moving goals. In the long run, meeting your overall goals of selling your home is the more critical need, correct? Your property has been on the market for X days. You're going to want to go over all the stats with them. Make sure when you're also presenting an offer, I'm glad I just read this, when you're presenting the offer to them, if the property has been on the market for a little bit, reevaluate that market analysis that you originally did with them. Remember, market analysis, CMAs are a snapshot in time. They change daily based on what's coming on and what's going off, okay? So if the house has been on for a little bit, you should be doing CMAs and keeping your seller updated and educated. So when an offer comes in, they have an idea of how did the fair market value change from the time we went on to where we are now. Sometimes it's gone up, sometimes it's gone down, but you need to be in constant communication with your sellers about that. And when an offer comes in, it's an important time to have reevaluated to make sure that this offer is within fair market value. If it's off, don't be afraid to use those comps to go back to the buyer's agent when you're negotiating. Have you seen comps A, B, and C? Because I feel like these comps are really similar to our house and those sold at blank price per square foot or however you're comparing them. So you use those comps even in negotiations. So it's good to go back and do that CMA at the time of an offer. Questions at all? And on that note, when dealing with sellers, I always go back because you're the messenger, right? You don't want your sellers to shoot the messenger. Somebody presented you an offer. You have the obligation to be able to present every offer to your seller. So sometimes the offers aren't the best, but it is your obligation to make them aware of every offer that comes in and present it to them. I do always make my sellers aware that what we think the value is in the home and what the statistics show the value is in the home. It's the buyers that determine what fair market value is. Okay, it's not me, it's not them, it's the buyers out there that determine fair market value. So hopefully we can get a really good grip on what that fair market value is based on the comps and on the CMAs that we're doing. Okay, but not to ever take anything personal, and you are just the messenger, and you need to do your due diligence and present this to them. And again, if it's so far off, I still say come back and counter that. Just drop a couple $1,000s. Don't take this offer 100% serious, but drop a couple $1,000s. Maybe they're just putting a little feeler out there, and they're really willing to come up much higher, but they wanted to kind of test the waters first. Let them know that's not really going to fly. We need to be a little bit more sincere with the offer. We want to work with you and see where this could come. We're going to bring the price down. Instead of $500,000, we're now at $497. Okay, we're sending you a signal. We want to work with you, but not at the price point that you came in with your offer. So become a little bit more realistic with us, and maybe we can come to terms. Okay. But never take anything too personal. People will throw some crazy numbers out there at times, given the market.
So question, Linda. That's when you're negotiating with somebody. You receive like an offer and you're in negotiations. But say like, as an example, you're listing the house at 300, you've been offered like 275, you're negotiating back and forth. You say, well, we'll lower the price to like 290 or whatever. Do you then have to, if that negotiation falls through, then have to lower that in MLS to that price, or you can leave it and wait
Yeah.
for more offers?
Exactly. You can leave it because that is not public knowledge what that offer is or where your client might have negotiated to. You still can leave it at 300,000. If you're not getting any activity, then that might be a conversation that you have with your seller and say, okay, maybe we should lower to 290 because it seems like that's going to pull in by doing your reverse MLS. You know how you can kind of count your people offline. In MLS, you can kind of see how many reverse searches you have offline by lowering it $10,000. Does that really jump up the amount of potential buyers that are going to see this listing offline?
Now, if you were going to do that, would you call agents that you'd received a previous offer from or that expressed a lot of interest in the house, but just not at that price, and let them know that? Or
yeah, it's a great marketing tool, Deb, because what I'll do is I'll do it before I drop it in MLS. I'll let them know I just had a conversation with my seller. I'm going to be putting this in MLS by the end of the night, but I wanted to make you aware because you did have a client who had some interest. We are going to be doing a price improvement to 290 instead of 300. Let me know if your clients have any interest in coming in. You'll see it reflected in MLS shortly, but I wanted to give you the courteous to call you first to let you know.
Okay.
And then they'll give you an update. Oh, they're still thinking about that house. They've been talking about it, or you know what I mean. They're going to give you usually some sort of input, and you'll know one way or the other if that's a possibility that you can continue to pursue.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. You were saying something too, and it brought something to mind, and now I've lost it. But do you guys know how to do that in MLS too? Is that something that you've done when you have a listing and you're putting a listing in MLS and it's an active listing in MLS? I always clone that listing and I put it in my off market side of my MLS. So you can play with all the numbers behind the scenes and it doesn't affect what's being shown in MLS. So let's say, again, you have like a property listed. Oh, I know what you said. Let's say you have a property listed at 300,000. But you think maybe the price really should be closer to 275, you can put it in your off-market MLS, run the numbers to kind of do a reverse search for you, and they'll say, let's say you have 1,250 people that fits the criteria for. And then if you do it at the 300 and you're saying, well, now I have 1,000 people. Well, that's a big differential, right? You have 250 people that you're missing seeing this listing because of the price point. And that's a powerful tool to use with your sellers when you are looking for a price adjustment. Now, I know we're getting off subject here, but in MLS, you have the opportunity to play with things like that offline so it doesn't show anywhere. It's just for your eyes only. Okay, so that's kind of a cool tool to use in MLS. What you had said earlier, Deb, though, is that if somebody comes in with an offer at like 275 and the property's 300,000, I usually use it as a rule of thumb that wherever somebody's coming in, if it's like, let's say a $20,000 differential, they want to meet halfway.
Okay.
Typically, they want to meet halfway. They're saying, okay, I really want to land, let's say they came in at 280 and you're at 3. I really want to land at 290 is usually in the back of my mind. People use that halfway point.
Okay.
Okay. For the most part. Okay. Working with the offer. Okay. Okay, that's Mo Anderson. Do you guys all know who Mo Anderson is? She's an amazing person in the company. Mo has really, she's done so much for the company. She's a great person to kind of go on to some of the Keller Williams YouTubes and watch Mo. her energy is just contagious. She's very good, very good. All right, so we are not going to do the breakouts. And we are going to go into where are we? This really just jumped on me here. Hold on one sec. Okay. So let's just talk for a second about negotiations. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen this slide or seen this up in the offices. I know Braintree has it pretty much everywhere. Our Norwell office, we have it on one of the signs in the office. It's really kind of the mantra, so to speak, is the WI 4Cs 2TS. So it's when you're trying to negotiate, always have in the back of your mind, it's a win-win or no deal, right? It's got to be a win-win for both sides, not only for the buyer, but also for the seller. Both parties need to walk away from a transaction feeling good about their transaction, not like they just got beaten up, okay? And I do talk about that with my buyers when I'm representing them. If we've really got the seller to come down dramatically in the price, when we go into home inspection, we can't kind of hit them over the head again with small little things. If it's something larger that we didn't know about that we need to address, then we need to address it. But you can't, it's very challenging if you're thinking of it from the seller side, and eventually you're going to be on that side, to really get them down on the price and then really ask for a lot during home inspection. So to kind of just see it from both sides is our objective. It's a win-win for both sides, both buyer and seller. No matter which side that we're representing, we want to make sure that everybody's feeling good about the transaction, because that's what's going to keep it moving forward in a positive light, and we're going to eventually get to the end, right? Integrity, always do the right thing. Comes back to ethical, you know, making sure that you are always representing your clients in the best light. You're being very ethical. You are upholding integrity. If there's something that your buyer is kind of confidentially sharing with you, that's in confidence, right? So keep the integrity of your relationship and keep the integrity of the transaction going in the right direction.
Voicemail.
What's that?
Sorry.
Oh, that's customers always come first. So the 4 C's, customers always come first, right? That's what we are here for. We're like servants in some respect, right? Our customers are always coming first. We are here to help them kind of accomplish their dreams, move them to their next homes. We want to have a strong commitment in all things. Communication, seek first to understand. I love this one. I use it at home with my children. Seek first to understand. Sometimes people are lashing out or saying something, but is that really what they mean? What's the motivation behind that? Okay, so take a step back. Again, look at the big picture. Don't always just react, especially when emotions start to run high. Try to look and understand what's underneath. What are the layers underneath that are causing that reaction? Creativity, ideas before results. That's one thing, especially in today's market, trying to be as creative as possible. No is not always a no. There's a way around that no. How can we still try to get this to come together when both sides think that we can't make it, you know, let's think outside the box. What are some creative ideas? How can we get this to come together? I have a buyer who wants to buy, you have a seller that wants to sell. We're at a standstill. How can we get this to work? Be creative, okay? Teamwork. We touched upon teamwork. Those are like your vendors that you're going to be working with throughout the process, the buyer, the seller, the list agent, your loan officer, your closing attorney. Everybody's part of this team to make sure that the transaction gets to the end. And it always starts with trust. Trust and honesty. Have good communication, trust, be, you know, just do the right thing all the time, and you guys will never have to worry. And success results through people. So that's what the WI 4C 2TS stands for. Kristen Bucher used to quiz us all the time on that when I first started at KW. She was very into this. So it's just a great mantra. All right. So putting it all together, action plan, prepare for your class, ahas. Anything that you guys have kind of had questions about as we've been talking, or as I've been talking for the past, I don't know how long, questions that you might have. So feel free to like stop, interrupt, like please. Experiences that you might have had a difficult situation, share, please.
You always have an attorney do the P&S?
Great question. So ironically, the last couple transactions I've had, the attorneys had asked me to draft it. I have no problems drafting it. And then they change it all up and redo the P&S. And I'm like, why did I just put it all together if you're going to just rip it apart and do it yourself? So I'll ask them, I'll let them know which P&S I'm using. And again, I get it from DocuSign. I'll let them know I'm using this particular format for the purchase and sales. Is this going to be acceptable? If they're like, no, we prefer this, I'll be like, then why don't you draft it? Because I don't have access to that. And the reason being is some of the formats that we're sending over, they can't cross out or change the language, and then it just results in longer addendums. So sometimes the attorney likes to draft it themselves. Now, do you guys know who's responsible for drafting the P&S? It's the list side. So the list side always starts that purchase and sales process. So, and it's usually right after the home inspection. Once I know that the home inspection went well and we are in good shape for the home inspection, I'll draft the purchase and sales, or I'll let the attorney know, okay, we can move to the next step. We've gone through home inspection and these are the items that we need to add to home inspection.
Linda, when you say the listing side, does that mean either the agent or the attorney for the seller?
Yes, exactly. So either the list agent or the attorney for the seller would draft it. That goes over to the buyer's agent, the buyer's attorney, excuse me. And then I usually remove myself at the beginning of that process, and I let the listing attorney, well, the seller's attorney with the buyer's attorney communicate. They're going to ask you for the accepted offer because they need to have the information from the offer to include into the P&S, and then any information from home inspection. Now, I will caution, I usually, if the attorney doesn't recommend it, I will suggest it to the attorneys. Let's put our home inspection items on a separate addendum that isn't referred to in the purchase and sales. Reason being, again, referring to the house that I'm closing on in Pembroke, there's an electrical issue there. Now, if I put that in the P&S and that P&S goes over to the appraiser, right? The appraiser is going to look at it and say there's an electrical issue. I'll appraise it, but I need to come back and reappraise it once I see that the work has been completed. And sometimes that will cause a little bit of a delay. So depending on what the home inspection items are, sometimes I'll put that as a separate addendum. And we still have everybody sign, and the attorneys can still draft it. But when I'm giving information to the lender and to the appraiser, I'm just giving the P&S. I'm not giving the home inspection addendum. Does that make sense? I've just found that it slows things down.
So that's for more major items.
Yep. Yep. I had one that was a roof, and because of the roof and all that information went over not only to the appraiser, but then the appraiser sent it, like the bank sent it out to the person that was going for the company for the home insurance. The homeowner's insurance wouldn't give it to him until that roof was replaced, which was never part of the transaction. The buyer was willing to do it, but they couldn't get home insurance until that roof was replaced. So it just threw a whole other layer into the transaction that, slowed things down, and we had to try to jump through some hoops for. So just be cautious.
So
I'm not trying to hide anything. It's just there's certain eyes that need
allowing things to move on, right? So another question, say you represent like a first-time buyer, money's really tight. I mean, we all know what the market's like. They don't want to pay the money for an attorney. Negotiate the P&S. And how do you deal with that?
On the buyer side?
You represent the buyer, yes. You get the P&S from the seller, and like your client, the first-time buyer, doesn't want to pay the money for their own attorney.
Sure. So many of the attorneys, especially on the buyer side, if they can get an attorney, talk to your lender, and let's say you're using Scott Fitzgerald or whomever you like to use. I like Mike Brost, I like Scott Fitzgerald, I like a few attorneys that I'll refer to. I'll call that lender and I'll ask, is Mike or is Scott an approved closing attorney for your bank? And if they are, that attorney will not charge for the review of purchase and sales because they're getting paid by the bank as the closing attorney from the bank. Ultimately,
awesome. Okay.
yeah. So I know Scott doesn't. Scott refers to it as like a double dip. He's like, I won't do that. I won't double dip. If I'm going to be representing the bank as the closing attorney, I'll review the purchase and sales for the buyer free of charge.
Perfect.
Yep. So just let them know. I mean, it's one of their biggest purchases. And if the seller is using an attorney, we all know what, you know, legal language is like. It's the double negative. It's
Right.
you know, you're not an attorney. They're not an attorney potentially. So it's always just good to be represented on such a big purchase.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And it's almost good to ask what you just said, to reach out to the buyer's attorney to find out if they would go above and beyond just the basic review. Because sometimes, and it's happened to me with a buyer, that the attorney representing the lender will just do the basic review and not go above and beyond and double dip, as you say.
Yep. So I like to determine who we want to use as a buyer's attorney first, and then call the bank and tell the bank, this is who we'd like to use. Is he or she on your approved vendor
Right.
list? Sometimes you're going to get some lenders, depending who you're using, and they're going to have their specific attorneys that they would prefer to use because they have a really good relationship and they want to kind of kick them the business.
Right.
But the client ultimately has the choice of saying, no, I want to make sure that my buyer attorney is also going to be the closing attorney.
Yep.
So we just have to, again, educate the buyer that they can push for that and advocate for that, and the lender should accommodate it as long as they're on the approved list.
And say if they're not on the approved list, could you reach out to that attorney?
Yeah, have that conversation with the attorney. But like Steve said, you just want to make sure they're not giving it a once over, that they're actually truly
Right.
representing that
Really
buyer.
representing the buyer, right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because in the past, I've had one time in the past, I've had the attorney representing the lender also charge the buyer an additional fee for a review of it.
Yes. Yep. They will do it. So that's
I've
why.
only let that happen once.
And that's why it's nice to have some relationships with attorneys.
Right.
And we know that these attorneys aren't going to do that. So I feel confident, that they're very good attorneys. They're not going to be the ones that are trying to cause turmoil, but they're not the pushover attorney either, right? So they're going to fight for their client. I've run into situations where attorneys are very black and white, and they just stuck their feet in the ground, and a transaction's gone south because they weren't being a little bit flexible. They were just, it's either this way or this way. And we were trying to find a common ground in between, and the attorney just wasn't of that mentality. So if you have a couple attorneys that you like and you have a good relationship with, you've worked with them, you think that they've really represented your clients well, then just kind of keep that in, like, your little box of tools there to pull out and use as referrals. When referring to clients, just try to be cautious there too. Make sure you're not just referring one, you're giving them a couple choices of people that they can talk to and see who is a good fit for them as well, personality wise.
So it would be a good idea in the, as soon as you can, like with the lenders that you prefer to use, to get their list of approved attorneys. Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Yep. So again, you're kind of like the captain steering the ship. So you know who the lender is, you know who you kind of want to use as the buyer's attorney. So if I'm talking to Vin or to Bob, I'm going to say, hey, is Scott or Mike on your approved list? I probably already know because I've done transactions with the group of them before. But if it's somebody new, I would just double check. This is who we're choosing to use as a buyer attorney. I want to confirm that they're also on your approved vendor list. And I'll ask the attorney too, because sometimes the lender will be like, I'm not sure, but the attorney usually knows whose list they're on as well. So.
Okay, awesome.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Look at that, we're near the end here. Other questions that you might have?
Was there something that you were going to share with us that you mentioned at the beginning? I can't remember what it was.
Oh, I do have two things, yes. So one thing I wanted to share, when dealing with sellers, a lot of times what's important to a seller is how much money am I going to take home, right? So if I'm selling at X price, how much does that mean that it's going to go into my pocket at the very end? Because they don't know about what are the closing costs. You know, I'm just seeing them selling at $500,000, and I know what my mortgage payoff is, but how much is going to end up in my pocket at the end? So I use, let me see, I'm going to try to screen share again. I see Elaine's there, so if I get stuck, new share.
Here, if you need me, just eating a bowl of cereal, but listening.
Thank you. All right, so I use this. I just put it together in Excel because I get the question all the time. Can you guys see this? It's pretty straightforward. It's just I list what the house might be being sold for. So if it's being sold for 700, this particular house was being sold for 715,000. What's the review of the purchase and sales from the attorney? On the sell side, remember the sellers has to pay for it because that's not, they don't have a closing attorney for that part of it, right? So the list side, they pay for the review of P&S, and it's usually about $850. A lot of the attorneys now like to throw in the additional cost of power of attorney because it's just easier for them. They don't have to take the time of going through the closing transaction. They just sign off on the client's behalf and then send it off, and it keeps things moving a little faster. So just break down with the attorney, what does the review of P&S, does that also include power of attorney in it? Okay, your stamps. So break down what the cost of the stamps is. Explain to the seller that you have to pay stamps. It's like a mass tax. It's $4.65 per thousand for your stamps. Your realtor fees, 5%, and let them know because they're going to be like, wow, that's a huge amount. Well, that doesn't go all to me, unfortunately, right? So that is to the listing agent company and to the buyer's agent's company, and then they divide it between the agents. So there's really 4 pieces of the pie that are getting that. Real estate taxes that might be left unpaid because you're going to see that on a closing disclosure. That's kind of to be determined based on where they are in the cycle of that, if it's quarterly and where they're falling, right? Mortgage payoff. They can let you know what their mortgage payoff is, and then you can pop that number in. Then with the selling side, you have the discharge fees, you have a discharge service, you also have the title fee. I might not have put that on here. That's kind of like with your discharges. They usually charge about $180 for your title. And then courier fees, believe it or not, sometimes there's wiring fees on there. Title fives can run anywhere between, $400 to $500. So if there's a Title V that needs to be done, you pop that number in there. 60 smoke certs are different for each town. On average, they're about 50. Sometimes they're higher. 60 is for condos. Okay, so that wouldn't go on if for a single family home. And then you total that all up, and then you take what the costs are less what these expenses are, and that's going to be their bottom line, roughly. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I had a question about the smoke certification. Just during this pandemic, so the transaction I did was in Milford, and at the time the fire department wouldn't come out, and I was advised that the sellers, of course, they were really great to deal with, and they went and did their due diligence to ensure it won't be a problem, but it's up to the buyers now to contact the fire department when it's acceptable to have the smoke cert done. So my question is, I've communicated that to my buyer, who's a friend of mine, of course, but am I legally obligated, or do I have any obligation to follow up on that, or am I cleared since the transaction is completed?
I would probably follow up with them just personally, just to make sure and remind them, because when you're going through a transaction, there's so many steps of it. And I think like we can all be overwhelmed. I mean, now that they're in, they're trying to probably get adjusted and they're excited to move their stuff in and decorate. And sometimes those things slip your mind. So I would just recommend or remind them that, you know, just you should have the fire department come out, give you the smoke cert. That way it gives you peace of mind knowing that, you know, your carbon monoxides are up where they're supposed to be and your smokes are working properly. God forbid anything was to ever happen. So I would probably just kind of reach out and remind them to do that. That COVID form that they signed for that, because they signed something at closing saying that they were being responsible for it. I think we're going to start to see that change it back to it being the seller's responsibility, because I know some towns are doing smoke inspections again now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Is there a timetable as to when those need to be done within a like certain amount of time? Like if I'm preparing for a listing to go on next week, can I do that now just to get it out, or schedule it now just to get out of the way, or does it make more sense to wait to the end of the closing?
I would wait only unless you think that the house is going to go like really, really quick, because the smoke inspections, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they only last for 60 days.
Okay, perfect.
I would wait until you have that offer in hand and you know when your close date is, and then you can get it done and off the books. But I would probably wait till you have that offer in hand. Unlike the Title V, right? Your Title V can last for 2 years and potentially 3 if you pump it each year in the interim. But typically it's a 2-year term that the Title V lasts for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Linda, can you scroll down the bottom just to see the rest of that spreadsheet or worksheet?
Yeah, so basically at the top, I always make sure I put a disclosure that it's just an estimate, right?
Okay.
And then I'll do down, and then I'll put in the total. I'll use the formula and I'll pop in the total right here of what the total expenses are. And then the estimated proceeds from closing, I'll take whatever this was it must have come to like, I don't know, whatever it was, 715 minus 678.45 was what this total was, less the payoff. So we know what the payoff is as of today. The payoff was 348 as of today, but let's say we have 45 days from now until close. We're probably going to make at least 1 or 2 more mortgage payments, so that might change slightly. So again, this is just kind of a picture for them. It's not hard and fast, but it just gives them an idea of where in the ballpark they're going to be.
This is what the seller pays?
This, yeah, for the seller. This is the items that the seller pays. So the seller's going to pay for the attorney review, the state tax stamps, the realtor fees, any real estate real estate taxes, maybe if there's a trash or if there's water, or so those things are going to get back in there too, because you're going to do your final water reading. And then your recording, your title, and then your courier fees. There could be, like I said earlier, some wiring fees in there too if you're doing the wiring of money. Title V, smoke certs. And again, this 60 is just if it is a condo. Okay.
And can you send us a copy of that also?
Yeah, what else I want to send you guys, and let me see if I can pull it up real quick to do for a share, which is really, really helpful for, first-time buyers. Let me see if I gotta minimize all this here. Hold on one sec. Just forms I've kind of collected along the way and kind of made my own along the way. Here's like a seller info sheet. And I apologize, my computer's like the slowest thing. But what I put together is I've put together 2 sheets, which I can also email you. And one is a seller accepted sheet, and a buyer, what do I do next sheet. So when a buyer has an accepted offer, it's kind of like, okay, it's exciting, but now I also don't know what I'm supposed to do. So it walks them through the process, and you fill in the dates from the offer of which all the items need to be done and completed by. And then on the seller side, it's the same thing. The seller is more general. Believe it or not, it's just loading. So hopefully I'll get this over to you guys in a second to share. All right, cool. Just give up. So where's my little share thing here? Share. Can you guys see that or no?
Not yet.
Maybe I'll do a new share. Okay. Okay. Can you see that now?
Yep.
All right, cool. So this is a great little form that I use for sellers, especially, you know, if when you're new and they're new, it kind of keeps you both on the same page to follow along. So it just kind of goes through and it says, congratulations. You have an accepted offer on your home. So it just walks them through. The buyer's going to schedule that home inspection within the 10 days, right? Hopefully it's within 7 or less. And it goes through what's going to happen. There may be a radon inspection during that. And it's just going to be general information for the buyers to become familiar with your home. Then it talks about having the Title V certificate or the certificate of compliance being completed, how we're going to work towards your purchase and sales agreements, and what is a purchase and sale. Once P&S is done, an appraiser is going to come out to your property. Sometimes there's an additional bank visit, a second appraisal that has to be done, again, depending on the condition of the home, if it's, you know, meeting the criteria, if it's a VA loan and there was some paling paint or a safety concern, and an appraiser has to come back to make sure that those items had been addressed. Then you're going to have your commitment letter due date that we, you know, once we get through home inspection and we get through purchase and sales, we can take a deep breath. We feel a little bit better. We're going towards, you know, the end of this. The next big one is getting your commitment. So once we have that commitment, then we know all the buyer's contingencies have been met. We feel pretty good now. We're moving along in the right direction. Once we get there, the other items that are going to be the responsibility of the seller is going to be making sure that the smoke certificate, like we talked about, is completed prior to closing. We're going to help them with getting their final water, the final oil, the final propane reading, depending on what they have for utilities. Remind them to reach on out to their utility providers to discontinue service. Talk with the post office and talk about the change of address to make sure things are going to be moving. On top of this, remind your clients to make sure that if they have, like, you know, things in Amazon or certain areas that they have an automatic delivery for, that they go in there and they change those addresses too. It's so incredible how many times, especially around Christmas, it's like, oh, I forgot to change that address and now the box is at the wrong house. Okay, so just kind of make them aware to go on to some of those other online shopping areas and change those addresses too. And then we talk about the closing time and the location, and that doesn't unfortunately usually get assigned until a few days prior to. I know that kind of is hard with work schedules and everybody wants to know a couple weeks out so they can plan. But a lot of the times the attorneys don't schedule it until we get closer. And then as we get to the final day, there will be the final walkthrough. And just to let them know what needs to be done at the house. It needs to be in broom swept condition, not to automatically assume somebody wants all your old paint or whatever, you know, items you want to leave in the garage. You need to either get approval for it or it needs to go. Okay. And then remind people of the garage door openers and items like that, and to bring a valid picture ID to close. I just had a closing that somebody didn't realize they needed a picture ID. It wasn't my client, I was on the sales side, and the buyer didn't have one during COVID. Try to get a picture ID during COVID, it's not so easy. So just remind them that it can't be expired and that they need a picture ID.
Hey, Linda, this is Eleni, just something to add there. Because I'm actually going to be somewhat affected by this. So because of COVID, if your license is expiring, for instance, mine's expiring next week, And so I can't get it renewed until October because of COVID. And so the state knows that. So FYI, if anybody is coming upon that,
Yep, that's a good point.
it's acceptable.
It is acceptable, yeah. And that you have a picture one that's, you know, you're gonna be able to get that renewed, but you probably also have your passport too. So sometimes even
Yeah.
your passport can be used if it's not your license. This particular person doesn't drive and just had an ID. And it had expired like 4 years ago. Not quite sure how you don't have an ID for 4 years, but it happened. So crazy things happen in this industry. We just have to say, okay, and figure out a solution, right? It's like, okay, we can still work through this. Let's figure this out. And it doesn't matter if it's your client or if it's the other person's client, it still affects your client. So you need to kind of put your head together and figure it out. So that's the seller side of things. Let me see if I can pull up my buyer side for you guys too. And again, I can email these all out to you because I do find them helpful. And I like to put a copy in my folder. So that way, when I'm looking through the folder, it brings everything to the forefront of where did we go? Let's just check off where we're at. Let's see. So this is an old one. See. Share screen. You guys have really helped me out here. I am now going to be a whiz at these Zoom classes here. All right. So. Okay, so for the buyer side of things, okay, what to expect once your offer has been accepted. So information and important dates that you'll need prior to closing. So I let them know, who do I usually use for home inspectors, because that's going to be our first step. Once your offer is accepted, we need to kind of get the home inspection on the books like ASAP. And then they can use whomever they like. If they don't know who they want to use or don't have somebody already scheduled, I'll just give them a couple names of people who I feel comfortable with. And then once that's complete, you can also do a radon test. If there's well water and you want to do that, you're more than welcome to do the well water. Then I fill in the financing part. So anything in red, I just usually change out and then save it underneath that client's name. So contact your lender for an accepted offer and discuss locking in your rates. Apply for your mortgage by, and I'm pulling that date from the offer. Okay, so the application needs to be submitted by the same time. Remember, is the purchase and sale signing, so that's the date that's going to go right here where it says 5/2. And then I let them know the purchase and sales agreement it's due on, and I'll put the date in, and I'll remind them the information of the closing attorney. Commitment and closing prep. So we want to make sure that the appraisal is done by a certain time. So I'll look and I'll find out, when's our commitment due. Let's say our commitment is due, July 21st. If that appraiser hasn't been out by July 10th, I'm calling the bank to be like, I haven't heard from the appraisal yet. Where are we with that process? Has it been ordered? Because we need to get this moving to stay on target with our dates. Okay, so that's the date that I'm going to put there. Is I want to remind myself and remind the buyer, we need to make sure the appraiser has been out at least 2 weeks prior to our commitment date, so that way we have plenty of time. I remind them to call their insurance company to get their homeowner's insurance. They're going to need that prior to close. They can't close without their home insurance. To talk to the post office again about the change of address. And to contact the lender, stay in touch with the lender, because they're going to need documents as they get closer to getting their commitment. They're going to need job verification, income verification again, bank statements again. The lender's going to ask for all of this stuff. So instead of it being a surprise, have conversations with that lender so they can be prepared in advance. And then contact the utility companies. We'll find out from the seller who that they're using. And start scheduling the utility companies to be transferred over to their name. what came up during the home inspection. So G is kind of going back to that home inspection and making sure anything that we asked to be repaired is being repaired, and that we're getting invoices from the licensed professionals that are doing those repairs. Okay. Usually in the purchase and sales, it's going to note that you have the ability to go back in and inspect those repairs. Prior to close, you don't want to be doing it during your final walkthrough. What happens if there's an issue, right? So we always want to be proactive. Once we know the repairs are done, let's go in and inspect them to make sure that they're to their likings, everybody's satisfied. We've checked that off. Okay, again, we don't want to be going into the day of close with a list of concerns. It's already a stressful time when you get to close date. We don't want to add anything more. And then final items. So they're going to need to get that closing disclosure 3 days prior to. Make sure that the buyers are aware when they get that closing disclosure from the bank, they acknowledge they've received it. So it's not just that the bank needs to send it to them. They have to acknowledge they received it 3 days prior to closing, or you cannot close. Okay. And then arrange when your final walkthrough is going to be. Did somebody have a question? And then arrange when your final walkthrough is going to be. And then let them know again, they're going to need us, the rest of the down payment, whether that's being wired over to the closing attorney. Are they coming with a certified check? How is the closing attorney want that handled? Closing attorneys will have their opinions on that. And then make sure that they have their IDs. Okay. So pretty straightforward, but believe it or not, when I go into people's homes, I see these sheets like either on their refrigerator or right on their kitchen counters, and they have the check marks on them. So they can be helpful when you're using them. Okay.
That is really cool.
Thanks.
Linda, what's the best way to start building, your contacts for, home inspectors, attorneys, and because obviously, personally for me, I know a lot of people in these businesses just by being friends with them, but you've never done business with them. So, how do you sort of
So for home inspectors, I always like to talk with other agents and see who, because that one's a hard one, right? Because you kind of learn by fire with them. So I would talk with other agents and see who is it that they like to use and why. The more questions you ask, the more knowledge you're going to gain. So why do I like to use Judd from Storage? And who would I recommend that particular person to? Would I use Judd for a first-time home buyer? Maybe not, because he's very, very meticulous, and he's going to find every little thing, which could potentially scare off a first-time home buyer because of his delivery method. But I have full confidence in Judd. It's just his delivery might not be perfect for everybody. Somebody who has a softer delivery, who doesn't make it seem like it's an issue, is Scott. He's not with Tiger anymore. He has his own company. So Scott's very good, very thorough. I haven't had any concerns with Scott, but his delivery is slightly different. So, if somebody asked me who do you use, I would say Judd. But it's very dependent upon the particular client I'm working with too, as to who I think might be a good fit. So when you talk to other agents to ask who they might use, ask them why and who would that be a good fit for. So when you're building your rapport, kind of who you could refer to certain clients and why. Same with attorneys. I like to talk to see what other agents who they prefer to use. Sometimes the attorneys will be open to doing like a coffee, and you can sit down and meet with them over coffee once we get out of this COVID thing, and get a feel for their personality. I think for attorneys, for me, it's more a personality thing. Who do I think is going to be really good? There's some attorneys that don't communicate at all, but get the job done, and you don't really even have any connection with them. And that might be good for certain type of personalities that don't want to have that warm and fuzzy feel. And then I have other attorneys that I think are really good about communicating, keeping you up to date every step of the way. And I think those would be good for different clientele. And then when it comes to lenders love to just meet and kind of get to know you and be a little bit more personal, I feel like. So for them, it's nice to do like a coffee or just, breakfast or something with them, see what their programs are like, ask questions about how quickly they can get it from start to close. Certain banks will only have certain programs that they can lend within, and then you have these other independent companies like a Radius that can work with multitudes of banks. So their programs might be a little bit more wide. Not everybody does construction loans or land loans, so you might need some lenders that specialize there. Some people will do VA, some people won't. So just trying to find out who works on what. But I would start by asking other agents and then meet with these people and see who you connect with, because you have to feel good about it too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, guys?
Do you have an estimate of closing costs? Like, you know how you did the net to the seller, the estimate? Do you have like an estimate of closing costs that you could send us?
Well, I have that worksheet for the seller. You mean for the buyer?
Yeah.
So the buyer is really unique because they're going to want to ask that from their lender. Okay, so when they're applying for the pre-approval, they should also ask from their lender what are some of the costs that are associated with using you, because it's not just about the rate, but what are the closing costs going to be? Because every lender's a little bit different on what they include, and sometimes it's not apples to apples, so trying to decipher between different lenders. So I would have the buyers or you talk with the lender and ask them to supply you with what their closing costs are.
Okay.
Yeah. Every lender is slightly different. Okay.
Okay.
And you can be competitive. So I've had clients who would search like 2 or 3 lenders and want to see what the closing costs package is going to entail and who could do the best job for them. Not only about the rate, but about the closing cost packages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Linda, sorry, this is Elaine again, and this might sound like a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. But obviously, because we're referring to attorneys, we're referring to lenders and home inspectors, do you find that you're getting referrals in return from some of these folks, or it just doesn't usually pan out that way?
Yeah, I don't actually get, that would be like a different type. I think that you're going to have a better chance getting referrals from certain lenders if you're working specifically with a lender, because sometimes buyers will go through their lender prior to going out to look. And so I do know that agents can get referrals from lenders. From a real estate attorney, I have never gotten a referral from a real estate attorney, but you might have a rapport with, let's say, a divorce attorney or an estate attorney, because somebody's family member might be ill and they're trying to prepare their estate. So you might have better luck getting referrals, business-to-business referrals from other types of attorneys as opposed to real estate attorneys. Has been my experience.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions?
Kind of a fun one. It was sort of fun. So when we were talking earlier about, your first touch point with the buyer or seller, and you're just, getting into that negotiation process. I remember when I did enterprise software sales that I would always launch the conversation with, what are you trying to do, right? And the buyer would go and they would just spill their guts. They would tell me every and anything. And I would find out so much information based on one open-ended question, and they just, open up their heart, right? Mm-hmm. Is there like any silver bullet question that you use as a best practice, either from the, the buyer or seller's perspective, that, really gets, that probing accomplished, and you're able to get a lot of details out of your, out of your counter part?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's probably the same for this industry as well. When you're talking with a buyer and you're asking them what they're looking for, especially if you're meeting them in the office during like a buyer consult, they're going to go off and tell you their dream home. They're going to tell you everything under the sun, which is all great information. But what I've found out is when you're like, okay, this is exciting, and you talk about what they're pre-approved for, and then you show them, potential properties online, you start to kind of determine, okay, that was the dream list, what are the must-haves? So, I try to challenge them slightly and be like, okay, so if we were able to find that 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, like you really wanted, but it didn't have an acre worth of property. Instead, it was like, on a half acre or whatever the case may be. And I try to just change the scenario. Is this something that I should still show you? Is this something that would still be considered? Or it doesn't have that 2-car attached garage, or it doesn't have AC, but potentially could be added. So I try to start to challenge them. But buyers, I think in particular, will let you know exactly what they want. I definitely don't want to fix her up, or I don't like doing that. Or so they're a little bit easier to pull out what they're looking for. On the sell side, usually it's more about money. So when I'm trying to talk with my sellers, I really try to ask questions about their motivation. I hone in on what has brought you to the point to want to make a move. Where are your next steps? Where do you see, your family being with those next steps? What does that kind of mean to you? If they're trying to move out of town, or they want to, downsize, they want easier living. What does that mean to you? So what are you going to be able to do with that free time? So I try to get them to focus a little bit on what the next steps are and what their true motivation is, as opposed to just being about the price, because the price might not be necessarily what they think it is. And so we need to kind of get to that and feel like we're on common grounds. But before we get to that, I want to know a little bit about their motivation to move.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Okay. So what I'm going to make sure that I do, and I'm just going to make myself a little list because I don't want to forget. I'm going to send you both the buyer and seller what to expect next. I'll send you that closing kind of little cheat sheet, the closing costs for the seller. And then was there anything else that I promised I would send? I don't want to make a promise.
Check for $1,000 to each of us.
For taking time out on this gorgeous Friday, Juneteenth, when offices are closed, but here we still are. We are so committed.
Yes, we are.
I know. It's our passion, right? So what else do we have better to do today? So I appreciate all you guys being here today. Clearly, feel free to reach out at any point if you have questions. A little bit about myself is I've been in the business for a little over 13 years. I started at another company. I was there for just under 10, and then I've been with KW for like 3.5 now. So I love what I do. I made the change when I was having my second child, and I just needed to have a different type of work environment and flexibility. And here I am 13 years later and loving what I'm doing. So it's a great profession. And I think what's wonderful about it is, like I said at the very beginning, is there's no 2 transactions that are going to be similar. There's going to be a frustrating day, and then there's going to be a really rewarding day. So just to always keep those emotions in between the lines and keep it in check. Because in any type of profession, there's those ups and downs, but it's how we kind of maneuver and guide ourselves through those, right? That keep us as professionals. So always feel free to reach on out. I'm in the Norwell office, but you have my contact information too when I send you all the sheets I said I would.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you again, and enjoy your weekend.
Yes, you too.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
That was fantastic.
Hi, Anna.
Anna, say hi. Say bye.
Bye,
Bye. That ended just in time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Right
Thanks so
up.
much, guys. Great to see you.
Bye,
Good weekend, guys.
All right. Enjoy.
Trying to figure out how to